Hi there, this is Dave Dubeau here with another episode of Canadian Profits TV. And as we're filming this, the kiddies are just going back to school. I know mine are super excited about it. Actually, we're kind of excited about it. My daughter's going into grade 8, so she gets to be a high schooler. My son's going into grade 5, so it's all the back to school excitement and chaos of getting used to getting up early in the morning and doing all that morning routine. So I'm sure you know all about that. So welcome back to school. On this week's episode of Canadian Profits TV, for our real estate tips, I'm going to be talking about the client first rent-to-own method. We've talked about traditional rent-to-own. We've talked about sandwich leases. We took a little break last week, had an interview with Peter Kinch. That was a lot of fun. So back on track with rent-to-own with client first. For our business breakthroughs, we're going to be talking about e-zines, communicating with your database using e-zines. And for our Mindset Minute, we'll be looking at the power of meditation and study. So stay tuned. All right, so for this week's business breakthrough, I want to talk about communicating with your clients, your prospects, your past customers through e-zines. So the last few weeks we were talking about the power of newsletters. And I still firmly believe that a paper and ink newsletter is the best way to go. However, in addition to, or if you simply can't do that, you can look at doing an e-zine. What's an e-zine? An e-zine is basically an electronic newsletter. Usually keep it fairly short and simple. Try and keep it down to one page. And again, the same idea as with regular paper and ink newsletters. You want to have it fun, entertaining, not too overwhelming with information and education. So again, it's the 40-60 rule. 40% should be content, talking about who you are, what you do, your actual business. And 60% should be kind of fun, light, jokes, cartoons, recipes, quotes, tips, that sort of thing, light type stuff. What are the pros of doing an e-zine? Well, first of all, it's very, very cheap. It's free, actually. You send it out by email. They're fairly easy to put together, fairly quick to do, probably easier and faster to do than a traditional paper and ink newsletter. And they can get passed around. If they're really good, they can get forwarded by email by people forwarding them on to other folks if they find it particularly interesting. So those are the pros of doing an e-zine. What are the cons? Well, the biggest con in my mind is just the sheer volume of email that we all get. Let's be frank. We don't open every single email that comes into our email box. We simply couldn't. There's just too much stuff coming in. So you're going to be very, very lucky if your open rate is between 10 and 20%. What does that mean? That means if you send out 100 e-zines, 100 emails, you're lucky if you get 10 of them to 20 of them actually opened. So that means 80 to 90% of the people that you're sending this to aren't even going to see it. It's either going to get filtered through their spam filters. They're going to be too busy. They're going to put it off. They're not going to look at it. On the other hand, if you've got paper and ink, you're sending it out in direct mail. It is more expensive, but the numbers get turned around. You're getting an 80 to 90% open rate of people actually looking at it and reading your newsletter. So there's the pros and cons of doing an e-zine. What's the best solution? Do both, right? I highly recommend that you do a monthly newsletter and at a different time in the month, do an e-zine as well. That way you're getting everybody and you're keeping in more regular contact with them. That's your business breakthrough for this week. All right, so for this week's real estate tips, I want to talk to you about my favorite, well, one of my top two rent-to-own methods, and that is the client first rent-to-own method. So what is this? What does that mean? Well, with traditional rent-to-own and with sandwich leases, we're actually starting with the house, the property first. We're getting that under contract, or we're trying to do a rent-to-own deal with that, and then we're trying to find the client for that particular property. So the challenge with that method is that quite often we're trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. We're trying to force feed somebody into a house that they might not be their idea of an ideal property. That's the challenge with those methods. The client first method goes the other way around. We start with the client first. We find someone who has some credit challenges, who doesn't qualify for a mortgage right now. However, someone who does have a good job, good income, can afford the payments, and has some cash up front and has fixable credit, if they meet all of those criteria, they're a A-list client for us. And in that case, if they meet all of that criteria and they want to move ahead, we'll actually let them go out with our friendly realtor and shop for a house that's available on the open market. If the house looks okay to us, it checks out all right, the price is okay, then we will actually buy that house for our client. That's why it's called the client first method. We find the client first, and then we find the property for them. Why do I like this method of rent-to-own? For several reasons. First of all, statistically speaking, from experience from other more experienced investors, the success rate is much greater in that situation than it is with sandwich leases, for example, or traditional rent-to-own. Why? Because people are putting up more cash up front. They're more serious about it. They're picking out the house. This is the house they want to live in. So the chances of them following the rules and doing everything they need to, oops, there goes my phone. Oh well, is much higher than those other methods. So client first rent-to-own, that's what that's all about. That's your real estate tip for this week. Now for your mindset minute this week, I want to talk about taking time out to think, to meditate, and to study. And this is something that I like to do. I'm guilty of not doing it as much as I'd like to, but I'm really trying to get in the habit of every day taking 45 minutes to an hour to really focus on reading something, on studying something, on working on sharpening the saw, as Stephen Covey would say, and really increasing my education on something. The famous educator and motivational speaker Earl Nightingale said very famously that if you took the time every day, I believe he said, if you studied a particular topic 1 hour a day, every single day for 3 years, you would be in the top 1% of experts in that field worldwide within 3 years. If you focused on one topic exclusively and you studied it for an hour a day. Now, I'm interested in multiple different topics. That's a bit of a challenge. So, but I still like to take 45 minutes to an hour a day to study and to sharpen the saw. I highly recommend that you do it as well. Like the old saying goes, readers are leaders or leaders are readers. So what are you doing to sharpen your saw every day? That's your Mindset Minute. Okay, thank you very much for tuning in to this week's episode of Canadian Profits TV. I want to remind you that our live rent-to-own training program is actually starting this week. It's starting this Thursday, so today, if you're watching this on Thursday, it's actually starting tonight. You can check out the website, see if there's any spots still available. That is rent2ownprofitstraining.com. See if we have any availability still, or give membership services a call. You'll see the number below on the screen here. And I also want to remind you about our $1 deal. Again, this week, we had a lot of people take us up on it last week. This week, it's my good friend Brandon Rowe with his 5 biggest marketing mistakes that Canadian entrepreneurs make. This is an interview that I did with Brandon, very, very astute young Canadian marketer, talking about the 5 biggest mistakes most Canadian entrepreneurs and real estate investors make time after time after time. You want to check that one out, see if you're making any of those mistakes and how to rectify that situation. So just click on the $1 deal tab on the right, and that can be yours for just $1. Thanks a lot for tuning in this week, and we'll see you next week on our next edition of Canadian Profits TV. Take care.
CanadianProfit.ca, your one source for Canadianized information, education, inspiration, webinars, teleclasses, and so much more. If you invest in real estate or own a business, you're at the right place. CanadianProfit.ca, CanadianProfit.ca, for Canadians just like you. CanadianProfit.ca. Not already a member? Take a test drive and get a free book. Just click on one of the banners to the right of the video. You'll be glad you did. CanadianProfit.ca. For Canadians just like